Right now, in this tournament, Lionel Messi is getting ready to walk onto a World Cup pitch for what might be his very last time. 38 years old, sixth World Cup, a record he shares with only one other man alive, his longtime rival Cristiano Ronaldo. But how Messi got here and what's actually happening inside his head when he plays, that's a story nobody else can tell. Every single defender who's ever lined up against this guy says the exact same thing. I knew what he was going to do. I saw it coming, and I still couldn't stop him. That's not normal. That's not just really good at soccer. Something else is going on. Scientists actually scanned his brain. Well, brains like his. And what they found is genuinely wild. The best players on Earth aren't reacting faster than everyone else. Their brains are doing something completely different. There's even a real published theory that for Messi, time itself moves differently for him, like the clock on the pitch runs slower for him than for everyone else around him. I know how that sounds. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to watch Messi play completely differently. Let's get into the science, because this is where it gets good. Back in 2013, researchers at Brunel University in London took 39 soccer players, everything from total beginners to semi-pro level, and put them inside an MRI machine, one by one. Then, they showed each guy video clips of a player dribbling straight at the camera, sometimes throwing in a fake, a shoulder dip, a stutter step, the kind of move designed to make you flinch. The better the player, the more of their brain lit up. Not less. More. Daniel Bishop, who led the study, found that the brains of skilled players showed way more activity in the motor regions compared to novices. But the wildest part? It wasn't about reacting faster. It was about not reacting. The best players could literally suppress the gut instinct to lunge at the fake. They saw the move coming, and some part of their brain just overrode the panic. Every defender Messi's ever faced has trained their whole life to read a player's body. And somewhere in Messi's brain, there's a switch that shuts that prediction down before it even starts. But not reacting too fast doesn't fully explain what happens next, because there's a separate, much stranger study, one that asks a question that sounds almost like science fiction. Because here's the part that genuinely broke my brain when I first read it. In 2016, two researchers, Jafari and Smith, published a paper in a peer-reviewed journal called Chronobiology International. The title? Can Lionel Messi's brain slow down time passing? They weren't being poetic. They meant it literally.
Their hypothesis: when Messi is in a high-speed, decisive moment, a defender charging at him, a gap opening for half a second, his neural system processes that moment at a fundamentally different speed than everyone else's. Like the game is running in slow motion for him, while everyone else is stuck at full speed. You might be thinking, come on, that's just a metaphor. That's what athletes always say. I was in the zone, everything slowed down. But Jafari and Smith argue this isn't a feeling.
It might be how his neurons are wired to communicate with each other. The same theory had already been floated about Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player who ever lived. Gretzky said he didn't see hockey the way other people did. The game felt slow to him, slow enough that he could read it like a book while everyone else was just reacting. That's not confidence talking. That's a different operating system. If your brain is running on a faster internal clock, you're buying yourself extra milliseconds nobody else has. Extra milliseconds to pick the right pass. Extra milliseconds to shift your weight before a defender commits. At elite level, that's the difference between impossible and inevitable.
Curiously, if Messi's brain is genuinely processing the game differently, the next question is, how does he execute all of this without it feeling like work? Watch him play. He doesn't look like he's thinking at all.
We've got a brain that suppresses panic better than everyone else's. We've got a neural clock that might run at a different speed. But none of that matters if you're consciously thinking about what to do next, and Messi isn't. There's a concept in psychology called automaticity. What happens when you've repeated something so many thousands of times that it stops being a decision? Your body just does it. The same way you don't consciously manage every micro-movement while walking. Your brain files it away so deep that conscious thought doesn't even get invited to the conversation. Messi has done that with dribbling, with cutting, with the fake that goes left before going right. These aren't choices he makes in the moment. They're stored motor programs, carved into his neural pathways through thousands of hours of practice, costing him basically nothing to execute. That frees up his brain for something more interesting. While his feet are on autopilot, his mind is scanning the entire field, tracking 6 players at once, reading where space is going to open up, 2 moves ahead while the defender is still catching up to move 1. Psychologists call the state he enters when all of this clicks at once flow state, one of the most studied phenomena in performance psychology. Time warps, effort disappears, everything just clicks. Athletes, musicians, surgeons all describe touching it for a few seconds at a time. Messi seems to live there. Flow state doesn't show up just because you want it to. It requires skills so deeply ingrained it's automatic, plus a challenge high enough to demand full focus. Too easy, you coast. Too hard, you panic. Hit that exact sweet spot, and that's where flow lives. Which for Messi, playing the best defenders on earth with everything on the line, seems to be exactly where he's most comfortable. So how does a kid from Rosario, Argentina develop this level of calm? The answer has almost nothing to do with talent. It has everything to do with who he is. Messi is an introvert. Deeply, genuinely introverted. Not in the casual way people throw that word around. His teachers in Rosario described him as small and quiet. His coaches said he barely spoke. Even now, as the most famous soccer player on the planet, he gives one-word interviews and looks like he'd rather be anywhere else than in front of a microphone. For years, people saw that as a weakness. The knock on Messi, especially next to Ronaldo, was that he lacked that fire, that loud chest-thumping energy that screams, "I am the best and I know it." But psychologists would tell you that's backwards. What introverts have is a genuine biological advantage, is an interior world that doesn't need external noise to stay calibrated. They're not feeding off the crowd, not rattled by silence. They go inward, and that's exactly where peak performance lives. On the pitch, that shows up as Messi moving through the chaos instead of reacting to it. Almost eerily calm. Researchers who studied his motivational profile describe him as intrinsically motivated. The reward he's chasing isn't the trophy or the headlines, it's the perfectly executed move itself. That's a massive deal, because externally motivated athletes inconsistent. They peak under the spotlight and fall apart when nobody's watching. Intrinsically motivated athletes train Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. like it's the Champions League final, because for them, it basically is. That obsessive, quiet consistency is what allows the automaticity we talked about to actually form. You don't build neural pathways like Messi's by showing up when it feels good. You build them by showing up every day for years because you love the work itself. That kind of psychological makeup doesn't come from nowhere. It came from something really hard. When Messi was 11 years old, he was 4 feet 4 inches. He hadn't grown since he was 9. His doctor ran the tests and came back with the diagnosis: growth hormone deficiency, a condition where the pituitary gland stops producing enough of the hormone that makes your body develop. Without treatment, he might max out at 4 feet 7. In a sport where size, strength, and explosiveness matter enormously, that's basically a death sentence for a professional career. The only fix was daily injections of human growth hormone, one leg, then the other, alternating every night for 3 straight years. Messi has talked about this.
In an interview that later ended up in a biography about him, he said, "Every night I had to stick a needle into my legs. Night after night after night. Every day of the week. 3 years. Over 1,000 injections. As a child." Here's where it gets even heavier. The treatment cost about $900 a month. His dad was a steel worker. The family couldn't afford it long term, and the clubs back home in Argentina either couldn't or wouldn't help cover the cost. Then, Barcelona showed up.
A scout watched this tiny kid play and was so blown away that the club agreed on the spot, on the back of a napkin, one of the most famous contracts in sports history, to pay for every injection, every vial, every appointment. on one condition. He had to leave Argentina at 13, essentially alone, surrounded by kids who didn't understand why the smallest guy on the field was injecting himself in the hotel bathroom every night. Think about what that does to a kid psychologically, the social stigma of being visibly different at that age. But in a foreign country, separated from everything familiar, all while trying to prove he deserved to be there. And he just kept going. Kept showing up, kept putting the needle in his leg every night, then going out the next morning and outplaying every kid in front of him. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, the idea that genuine adversity, pushed through rather than around, builds a kind of psychological armor that normal circumstances can't create. Messi built something inside himself that no amount of coaching can manufacture. Because what happened after Barcelona wasn't a straight line to glory. What came next would have broken most people entirely.
Everyone knows the Qatar 2022 ending. The trophy, the bisht, the image that broke the internet. But to understand why that moment hit the way it did, you have to understand the decade of public failure that came before it. Brutal and relentless enough that most people genuinely thought he was cursed. 2014 World Cup Final. Argentina versus Germany. Messi wins the Golden Ball as the tournament's best player while losing the final. 2015 Copa America Final. Lost. 2016 Copa America Final. Lost again. Back-to-back, same result. That one broke him publicly. He walked up to a microphone after the 2016 final, eyes completely empty, and retired from the national team. Done. Finished. The reaction in Argentina was savage. Burned jerseys, columnists calling him a club player who never had what it took for his country. And he came back anyway. Psychologist Angela Duckworth spent years studying what separates people who achieve extraordinary things from everyone else. Her conclusion, in her book Grit, is that the defining factor isn't talent or even hard work in the traditional sense. It's the combination of passion and perseverance over the long run, showing up through failure and public humiliation because the thing you're chasing matters more than the pain of failing at it. Messi is the living definition of that. While he was being roasted on Argentine television, he was still going out for Barcelona and being the best player on earth because his internal engine never ran on Argentina's approval. It ran on something deeper. That armor he built as a 13-year-old injecting himself in a foreign country every night? That's what was holding him together. Then, 2022 happened. Qatar happened. A guy told for a decade he could never deliver what it counted most, delivered the greatest World Cup performance anyone had ever seen. And that wasn't the end. Because right now, he's doing it again. Let me put this into perspective. Right now, in this tournament, Lionel Messi is playing what is almost certainly his last World Cup. Argentina versus Algeria, his 6th World Cup, tied with Ronaldo, but unmatched by anyone else in the sport's history before them. He's doing it at 38, coming off a hamstring injury, as the defending champion, trying to do something no team has managed since Brazil in 1962, win back-to-back. The football world is watching differently this time, and there's a psychological reason for that. It's called mortality salience, the idea that when we become aware something is ending, it changes how we experience it, not just emotionally, but cognitively. Our brain sharpens its attention and stores the moment differently than regular memories. It's why the last episode of a show you love hits harder than any before it. You're not imagining that feeling watching Messi right now. Your brain is processing him differently because some part of you knows this is it. Everything we've talked about in this video, the Busier brain that beats the faint, the neural clock that slows down time, the flow state he lives in, the introvert's internal compass, the armor he built as a kid injecting himself every night, the grit that brought him back after a decade of losing finals, all of it has been building to exactly this moment. He never needed the crowd,
never needed to be the loudest guy on the pitch. His motivation was always about the work itself, the thing he fell in love with as a 4-year-old kid in Rosario. And that's what psychologists genuinely can't fully explain. You can map the brain activity. You can measure the grit score on a Duckworth scale. You can model the time perception. But there's no equation for what it looks like when a 38-year-old man, told at 13 he might never grow, who lost 4 finals in a row, who retired in heartbreak and came back anyway, steps onto a World Cup field one final time and still makes every defender on Earth look like they're standing still. Some things science gets close to. It doesn't quite close the gap. We started with a question. Every defender who's ever faced Messi says the same thing. I knew what he was going to do, and I still couldn't stop him. Now you know why. A brain that fires harder and suppresses instinct better than anyone else's. A neural clock that might genuinely run at a different speed. A flow state he doesn't chase, he lives in. A quiet internal fuel of an introvert who never needed your applause. A kid who stuck a needle in his legs every night for 3 years and came out the other side with psychological armor nobody could break. A level of grit that turned a decade of public failure into the greatest redemption story in sports history. Messi isn't superhuman because he was born different. He's superhuman because every hard thing that happened to him, the diagnosis, the move, the losses, the burned jerseys, he just kept showing up until his brain had no choice but to become extraordinary. That's the thing science can measure but can't fully explain. Talent gets you noticed, but that's what makes you Messi. If this video hit different for you, hit subscribe. We go deep on the psychology and science behind the greatest athletes and moments in sports. Share this with somebody who needs to see it, because right now, while Messi is still out there on that pitch, is exactly the right time. There's a reason watching him feels like witnessing something sacred. Your brain knows this is the last time.